Good morning.
Good morning. It's Sunday, July 28th, 2024. And our conversation, our talk today is entitled The Radiance of Living Large. And we're inspired, of course, by the Olympic contenders and the competitions going on. Every single person there competing is living large. They are going for the gusto.
They're going for the gold.
They're going for the gold.
So you can ask yourself in your life, am I going for the gold?
Yes, how much good do you anticipate? Do you expect? Do you believe God wants you to have? That's a very important question to ask yourself because many of us grew up with the idea that we're miserable sinners and we'd be lucky if we made it to heaven.
I've sometimes been miserable, but I didn't think of myself as a
A
sinner.
miserable sinner. Yeah, and so that's old Christianity, to try to scare people into behaving. But when you learn it as a small child, it can be hard to release.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to unlearn. And so then we think that God doesn't want us to have very much or very much good or very much money or whatever. Many of us were taught that was filthy lucre, filthy money, and that money was the source of all evil. And that's simply not true. As a matter of fact, the Bible doesn't even say that. It says the love of money is the source of all
So
evil.
you can like money, but please don't love it.
You can love the good
Yeah.
that you enjoy and it brings, but without loving for money's sake. You probably know someone. I just know one or two individuals that just loved money for the sake of having it and accumulating it. And it is an avarice. But that's not what we want to talk about. We want to talk about living large. And I know you want to share something about mastery, which I support and I agree with. But I want to start with just this big picture of God. What does God how does God give to us? Do you believe God creates, is always creating? And recently we watched a show, or one or two shows about our universe and what we're learning with our biggest telescopes that are now going out into space. And it's so interesting because, back in the 1700s and whatnot, we thought everything revolved around the Earth. We were the center of all those
And
stars.
some people still believe that.
Yeah. And then we had, I think it was Copernicus who decided that, or Galileo, I don't remember which one, but somebody said, no, it's actually we evolved around the sun. So the sun is the center of our universe. And we really thought that, we were it. This was it. And we did discover the Milky Way. We could see the Milky Way as stars. But we thought we were the only, uh, what do we call the Milky Way? Galaxy.
Galaxy, yeah.
We thought we were the only one. And so as we've gotten progressively bigger telescopes, what we now realize what we had thought were stars are nearly all galaxies. It's it's like, you know, the number of things that we're discovering, and it just keeps going. It's endless. But they're now saying, we used to say we had 50 trillion, no, 50 million trillion, 50 million trillion stars. We now say we have 50 million trillion galaxies.
And we're the only planet with life.
And they're all expanding. And it's just it's really thought provoking. How could there be so many galaxies? How could there be that much life, that much variability? How many does God need to create? you know, and how does God create? In the Bible, it says, "And God said, let there be." Let there be light. And so that is why we say that God creates with her word. It says, let there be, and suddenly there is. In other words, God thinks it or states it, and it exists. So if that's true, how do we create? Because we know that we've had fabulous inventions and creations through human beings. And we believe that God creates through our thinking, through our thoughts and beliefs. And so it's the idea that was taught to me in the early days, and it was very helpful for me to visualize how this thing worked, that God's mind worked through our mind to create what we desire and what we think about and what we expect. And that is through an idea of a mold. But I used to visualize ice cubes. You know, we pour the liquid water into the ice cubes, they freeze, and out plops the ice that we wanted.
In whatever shape the mold is.
Exactly, exactly. And so that my thinking and expecting and what I affirm in my thinking that is true for me or that I have, God creates through my mind. Why would it not?
Like ice sculpture.
Yes, like ice sculpture. So ask yourself, what are your thoughts most of the time? Not just one time. You can't just think of it one time, but what do you expect for yourself? What do you anticipate? What do you tell yourself you can be or do or have? This is very, very important. And when you see that when you focus on something, you desire it greatly, because a strong desire is very important. Believing you can have it, believing it's being created, much like the ice, it takes a little while to freeze. It does, sometimes it's instant, sometimes it's instant. I found with personal healings and healings with others, they can be instantaneous. So even time doesn't fit our expectations. But for most circumstances in our life, it takes time. And we have to stay positive and expect the good.
Yeah, I think that we are constantly creating a mold. And that mold, if you think of it as sculpture, when you pour the water in, and imagine pouring God into the mold. And as you pour God into the mold, it takes form. And there's lots of evidence that this has happened also in the past through people that we don't know. But Leonardo da Vinci did a lot of drawings of things that didn't exist in his time. He drew a helicopter. We didn't have one. Nobody had even a concept of such a thing. And so we have had information, knowledge pour into us from a dimension that we can't see. We can't, and we would actually say it doesn't exist because we can't see it. Our reality appears to be primarily based on what our senses tell us. And the problem with God is that God is not within that sensory preview. And so, but there's evidence that God exists in that wisdom, knowledge, invention, thought, ideas percolate through us, and often from a variety of different people. Another interesting part of this is that there's a lot of scientists who have been working on projects independent of each other and didn't know they were working. Each didn't know the other was working on a project or the same project. And when they begin publishing their work or they begin doing communicating with each other, they find out there's suddenly 8 or 9 people in different parts of the world all working on the same thing that didn't know each other at all and didn't know they were working on it. So where does this thought come from? Where does this consciousness come from? So we'd like to suggest to you to consider that the mind of God, which is liquid thought, if you will, liquid creation, is waiting for you to create the mold to pour into. And whenever you do that, when you pour your consciousness into an idea, that idea can take form, and it can take any form. And so electricity, we learned how to manage that a long time ago. It existed before we knew it existed. And how have we used it? We have used it for the good, and we have used it for the bad. We poured it into the mold, and it has the possibility. It has infinite potential. And so when we begin to think of our lives as having infinite potential, wow, that's very different than, well, I live in a very limited world. I have limited resources. I can't do very much. I wish I could. I'd like to do more. But you know, at my age or at my condition or where I live, or we have imposed so many restrictions and conditions on our consciousness that actually sometimes it amazes me that we can create anything because we live in that limitation. And now we're confronting something which I think is, to me, exciting and frightening, and that's AI. when I say it's exciting, because we now have the possibility of asking questions and moving more deeply into consciousness than ever before, while at the same time, we're being given an opportunity to know less and hand it over to someone else, to hand it over to an intelligence that isn't ours. I saw today they were a thing on TV that suggested that if you wanted to write a letter like for a resume, or you wanted to write a letter of introduction, don't bother writing it yourself. Go to AI and tell them to write it. And suddenly I realized that writing, thinking, the consciousness that's required for formalizing an idea actually could be at risk.
Yeah, yeah, it's okay if it's a 4-year-old, like what one saying, his 4-year-old daughter
Yeah.
wanted to tell an athlete how much she admired her and wanted to be like her one day. That's fine to ask a 4-year-old to ask an AI app to write a letter. But how does she ever learn to write a letter if she's not
Yeah,
willing to
and
do it herself eventually?
and that brings me to a piece, and I talked about this before, and I can never remember the author. He's a short man, rather slender, with black curly hair, and he's written several best-selling books. And this one book is about success, and what is the recipe for success? And the recipe for success is, the first thing he says is you have to put in your 10,000 hours. Now, why is that important? The 10,000 hours demonstrates the commitment you have to a thing that you want to master. It's a consciousness demonstration. And so actually, before that, he said you need to have a passion. And you need to be passionate about something so passionate, so enthusiastic, so over the top in love with the idea that you're willing to put in your 10,000 hours. And I'm an artist, and I meet a lot of artists. And what I've noticed is a lot of artists that don't do very well. And the reason that they don't do very well is not because they don't have innate talent or the possibility of extraordinary creativity. It's because they only create when they feel like it. They only feel like it when they're in the right mood. And when they're not in the mood, and many of them will practice many different creative things, but they don't get very good at any of them because it's basically mood driven rather than passion driven. And so if you have a thing that you want to do, that you want to accomplish, you want to see happen in your life, you're going to have to be disciplined enough, like in meditation, to become good enough at it that you have mastery. When you meditate, you can tell the difference between having meditated frequently and infrequently, because the infrequent meditation very often has you wondering if it's working, has you restless and wondering how long you need to do it. And practiced meditation becomes a statement in consciousness that seems normal and reasonable and enjoyable and grows you. And so that passion combined with the discipline of mastery enables you to have that mold so completely formed that everything you pour into it comes out exactly the way it needs to come out for you to realize your passion in real physical terms. You know, when we talk about healing, when you ask somebody to help you with healing, you could say, I'll think about it, or I'll focus my mind on it. I wish you thought my good thoughts and prayers, and you can hope they get better, or you can go into that quiet place that you live in consciousness. You can see that person healing. You can know that that healing is a possibility. You can believe so passionately that that healing can actually occur, that you can
It is occurring.
it's occurring, that you can actually enter into the consciousness of the person who's ill, and they can experience the consciousness of healing. But not if you haven't practiced it, not if you haven't gotten to the point where that idea flows through you and into the universe, out of the universe and into you and through everything. But if on the other hand, it's a desperation, kind of a fire engine effort, where the only time you meditate is when you want to put out a fire. Unfortunately, that kind of emergency treatment doesn't really have the same power as does the practiced meditation. So one is passion. Two is you got to put into time. Three, which this author talks about, is serendipity, which I really don't believe is serendipity. I really believe it's the law of attraction. I really believe that if when you practice something so passionately and you get to be so good at it, it radiates. And I remember when I was on the board of directors for our organization, I would often have to go to church, and I was invited to go to churches to help ministers solve problems that they might have. And some of them had problems on stage, talking, speaking. And one of the things I noticed is that there were some ministers that when they walked on the stage, you already got what they were doing. You would see them and you would feel that, wow, this is going to be good. They had a presence of mind, they had a presence of consciousness, a determination, and they had a level of skill that you couldn't argue. And the tentativeness, the uncertainty, the lack of assuredness, the lack of passion shows up. And people read it, they see it. Oh, it's like you learned a long time ago. I'm sure most of you, if you're ever going to do any public speaking, you don't start off with an apology. And without meaning to, we often apologize for our request. We often say, God, I know I'm not worth it, but I mean, I'm sorry I'm even asking, but this is what I need. As opposed to, it is the nature of creation to flow through you.
Yeah, no, it's a phrase I used to use a lot, and it comes from the Bible. It is the Father's good pleasure
To bring you the kingdom.
to give to me the kingdom, which is the kingdom of heaven, which is the consciousness of spirituality, and all things added unto that, so.
Yes.
So when we believe that God wants us to have what we create in our minds manifest, God wants us to have what we desire. I also used to think of that word desire as desire, of the sire, the Father. So our desires are not evil or bad. Our desires give us something to create, to something to experience, something to do, something to succeed in, because there's nothing holding you back except what your beliefs are that hold you back.
I have to share the story of Dr. David Walker, who was invited to a very, very
Posh
posh, yeah, that's a good choice of words.
dinner.
And everybody was well dressed, and he was not accustomed to this. This was not his upbringing, so he wasn't quite sure what to do. And the person who was serving came over to him and said, "Sir, do you require cream
with your coffee?"
with your coffee?" And Dr. Walker said to himself, "I never thought of
Requiring it.
I have been living in desire." And he said, "Yes, I require that." And it changed his life. I mean, that one incident. And I guess it's so powerful when I heard them say that. I mean, we all laughed and enjoyed, but at the same time, we were thinking,
How often do we do that?
what do you require? Not just what do you desire? And what you desire can remain a desire. What you require can come into existence. I require just payment for the things that I do. I require that people be kind to me and that I be kind to them. It's a requirement. It's not a desire. It's a requirement. And so when it becomes a requirement, it's like walking on the stage and saying, "This is my stage," as opposed to walking on the stage and saying, "I hope this is my stage. I so hope this is going to work out for me." I require. And so ask yourself today, what do I require of my life? What do I require occur in my life that would satisfy my desire and my commitment to the life that I'm living?
Exactly. So think about what you would like to create. Think about what mold you can make in your mind and hold it with anticipation. And we also say we call this affirmative prayer spiritual mind treatment also, and because we're treating our mind to a new idea. So we have a saying that says, "Treat and move your feet." In other words, you have the idea, you do an affirmative prayer knowing that God's creating that through you, and then you move in that direction. You do everything you can in the direction of that. Sometimes it's just waiting till the right connections are made and the right things show up for you to move forward with it. But it starts with the idea and the desire, and anything you can do for those 10,000 hours for preparation, because that is important for mastery.
Mhm.
Um,
And you can start gently. You can say to yourself, "What's the least I can do in favor of the mastery that I want to accomplish? And let me do that today."
exactly, good point. And for example, even public speaking, most people, even people who want to be ministers, are not good at, are not very good in the beginning because they've got to get some of those hours in to get the mastery of being comfortable and being able to be expressive with their speeches. So it takes those 10,000 hours or some hours anyway, to be good. But we all have that capability. We all have a mind, and that if we just realize that's how we create. It starts with an idea, and then it starts with the next is an expectation, and then moving one foot in front of the other.
And it's really, really important that you know that not being good at something doesn't mean you shouldn't do it.
Right. That's how you
Because
get good.
mastery is accomplished as a result of thousands and thousands of hours of failures. I mean, and no matter how good you are at something, you can look back a year later and say, wow, I wasn't very good compared to now. And so if you're looking for success as a barometer of I should or shouldn't do this, look at your level of passion and go back and continue to do it, and you'll get better at it. Or it'll take you to where you need to go to do whatever is necessary to have that mastery. You know, I think I've shared this before. I was talking to a person who was looking at my artwork and he was so impressed with the fine detail. And he said, you know, I can't even draw a straight line. And I said, I couldn't either for a long time. So I used a ruler. And he said, no, you don't understand. I said, no, you don't understand. You use a ruler if you can't draw a line until you can draw a line straight without a ruler. And he said, oh my God, I have been doing that conversation in a lot of areas of my life. And I said, we all have. If you need a ruler,
Yeah.
get a ruler.
And you don't create just one thing.
No.
You know, you do something as long as you love it and as long as it's working. And what the rule I've always lived by, because I've gone through a lot of different routes, is notice when a door shuts, and then you need to walk through another door.
You don't need a battering ram.
That's right. So you just notice what doors are opening, what doors are shutting, and you go in that direction, because I really do believe that everything that happens to me happens for me, even though I don't always see it. May not seem like a good thing. It may
Whatever-
even hurt.
Whatever happens to me happens for me.
For me.
If we didn't forget that, that would be, I think, a life changer. Because so often when something happens to me, my assessment is it has to do with what's wrong with me.
Or a failure, or I'm
failure,
being
yeah.
punished.
Yes, as opposed to it's happening for me. I don't have to know how right now. That could be a mystery. I could allow it to be whatever it is until I can figure it out at some later point. We have to be careful that we don't let failure stop us and unfortunately go beyond stopping us, stop it, or even having a future.
Exactly. We watched some of the Olympians and some that thought they were going to be the best and the tops have had failures. A gymnast fell twice in two different events, and he was the #1 American gymnast. And I'm sure he's crushed. But you know what? It's time. It's time for some of the others to be the best.
And it's time for him to either improve or change what he's doing so that he can continue to enjoy the life he's been enjoying, only through a different vehicle.
Exactly.
And so whatever you're doing that isn't working, there may be a way you can make it work, or maybe that's leading you to having to try something you haven't tried that can work for you. But the bottom line is you're going to have to be passionate enough and committed enough to put in the time to find out, is it me? Is it is this a good fit? Is there something wrong with it that I can work on and I can improve, but not quitting, not giving up.
And always know that God is always creating. When you think of those 50 million trillion galaxies, God's always creating something. And God created through Einstein, he created through Ralph Waldo Emerson, all the, Shakespeare, all of the great creations is really God coming through people. As a matter of fact, the musicians and songwriters and whatnot will tell you that they hear it, and they receive it. Well, where are they receiving it from? Well, it just
Really?
comes to you. So, so you also have that ability, and just know that, and have fun with it, and anticipate good things. Enjoy it. Enjoy life. Enjoy the next adventure. And so I think it's time for us to close with that. And interestingly, I signed on like an hour early, but I did not put the the screen
Oh.
share item up.
That's okay.
So I think we'll just talk about it.
Right, so if you want to contribute to this ministry and help us be able to continue the work that we're doing, then you can go to our website, which is,
CSL, which stands for Center for Spiritual Living, cslpalmbeaches.org. And there is a button at the top where it can ways to donate. And we know many of you are already set up with ongoing donations, and we thank you for those. They do make it possible for this work to continue.
you know, when we talk about this, I always think I'm on PBS.
And it's true.
And just like PBS, it's only because of you that we're here. You know, we couldn't do this alone. We wouldn't do this alone. And, but also I want to say that your contribution in consciousness is every bit as great as any contribution that any of you have made in dollars. Because we have the most amazing time talking about what we're going to talk about. And we wouldn't have that conversation if we weren't doing this.
It's
So
true.
you help us be the ministers that we are. If you feel you receive enough good from us that you want to support us, then please do, and we appreciate it. I'd like us to end with a short treatment, if we could.
Okay, permanent prayer.
Yeah,
All right, let's do that. So let's just go within, close our eyes and go into our hearts and know that there's one power, one presence in the universe that is always creating. And we call it by many names: infinite intelligence, universal love, God.
divine intelligence.
Whatever we call it, we know it is always present and always operating through us.
For that we are grateful. For that we now know that we are not alone and have never been alone. We embrace the realization that we are connected to the infinite, that the infinite is flowing through us, that we are all that is needed, all that is necessary, and all that is good for this life that we are living. And we say thank you for the opportunity to live this life as fully as we are living it. And we say thank you for all the guidance and support and encouragement we receive from this dimension and from all dimensions. And so we know, and we say thank you to those we love and care about, as well as to ourselves. And with this, we end this treatment and say, and so it is.
So it is.
Thank you.
So I'm